Eric, I have a question for you as you're doing this.
Certainly, and please ask questions while I'm doing this. Yes.
So this seems to be the same as doing it in Lightroom.
Yes.
So, okay. So the way I would be interested in it is if you could put a mask over it. So when you do it on the mask, if you screw up, it's non-destructive.
Or
Yeah.
an adjustment layer.
Now you can do that with an adjustment layer in Photoshop, but what I do, which is even better, is I
Okay.
use two things. I'm going to duplicate this layer, and that's where I should have started. I forgot to do that. I duplicate the layer, and I'm only going to work on the duplicated layer, not on the
Original. Yeah.
original, so it's non-destructive. But also the other key, you can skip the masking in many, many cases if you simply are working from a duplicate A and B, you use the history panel. And the history panel, so now let me create some history on this layer, is I'm going to lighten up her. I'm going to turn off the bottom layer just so it doesn't confuse anybody. And I'm going to lighten up her, but since it's set to midtones, it won't lighten up her pantsuit there. So I have to go to shadows. And now I can lighten that up. And not that I really want to, but let's just say I need to. And I'm going to click and drag and click and drag a few times. And I've lightened that up. Now, if you go to your history panel, it shows you everything you've done on this layer so far. This is where I started when I first opened the image. And then here are all the things that have been done to this image. And these are all the dodges that I've done along the way. And let's say this is too dark on this, I don't know whether it's a top and pants, I guess it is. I can just say, all right, let's go back to where it was, and I can click on the dodge tool, and that takes me back. And I can go back one step, I can go back 50 steps. I think I've got it set to 90 steps because I do some pretty complex things, and occasionally I'll need that. So I think it's a much easier way to work than creating masks and then having masks to deal with at one point or another. Okay, let's go back to my layers and let's do the burn tool. So this is all dodge. Now I'm going to hit this. I'm going to select the burn tool. Same thing's true with the burn tool. Highlights, exposure, set it relatively low, like I said. And it's set at 132, which is this size, which is fine for what I'm going to use it for. So I'm going to do a couple of things. One, I'm going to go and I am going to burn in, these are name tags on this table, but they're a little light. And I'm just going to create some darkness on them. Now, it won't do a perfect job because it's simply darkening the highlights, but it improved it for a rough job. If I was really going to do this perfectly, I would come and use one of my selection tools, and I would select all this, and I would use the brightness and contrast tool to improve the look of this. But I'm still in the burn tool, so I'm going to go here, and there's highlights in this curtain that are distracting. So I'm going to burn those in a little bit. And the places where this makes the most amount of sense for me typically is faces, so that I could create a little more shadow on one side of someone's face, or I could brighten up a face with a dodge, or I could burn in a little bit if I needed to, or create a little more shadow underneath in the neck so it's not so obvious. And those are places where the burn tool is used a little bit more. Ansel Adams would be jumping and rolling over his grave, but that's the way it's used these days. Okay,
I have a question.
Yeah.
On the burn tool. I've had situations where there's a hot spot or a total white with no color, and I've tried using the burn tool, and it's white on white. There was nothing to darken. So I would change the exposure a little bit, but is that a common problem, or is there
sort of.
another way
so-
to do it?
So I am quite sure, even if it was bright white and there was no color or pixels in there, if you were on the highlights at the top here for the range,
Mhm.
it would make it darker, because I can do that with this right here. I could make this, I could do it 10 or 12 times, or I can make the exposure high and I could turn it black if I want to. So it can be done,
Okay.
but it's not a good way to do it. And to get rid of those hot spots, I would recommend cloning those hot spots. And we can look at that, doing that in another
Yeah.
piece.
Yeah, I've tried that too. Yeah, okay, thank you. I have an older version of Photoshop. I haven't upgraded to the latest yet, but tools are similar. So yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So this is not a good look, but I just wanted to show what you could do with it if you put the exposure way up.
Mhm.
And I'm just going to go back in history just to show you guys.
Are you filling your tub? Can I have it when you're done?
Okay, so there's the dodge and the burn. Now let's go to cloning. And
Erica,
yes,
I have questions. So this the foreground and background color does it matter? Doesn't, or it doesn't matter?
the color that you're trying to dodge or burn.
No, the color swatch, you know, the foreground and the background color right now, that one, yes.
That doesn't affect anything.
Oh,
Because
okay.
all it's doing is affecting your exposure and making it lighter or darker.
Oh, okay. So it doesn't need to be set to default, right?
No, you don't have to worry about anything over there.
So
Thank
Eric,
you.
I had a quick question on the history tool.
Yes,
If you click on one of the history buttons, do you lose everything going forward?
only if, no, because see, I jumped here.
Uh-huh.
All these are still here, so I can go back to the,
Okay.
yeah. Unless you save it,
Make a change, or
or
if you make a change.
if you, decide to stick there and then make a change after that. So if I go back to here
Uh-huh.
and then I make another change, I'm gonna lose those
Lose,
that were
okay.
after there.
Got it.
Okay.
Larry, do you normally start with it when you're working on a photograph? Would
Yeah.
dodging and burning be the first thing that you work on? You mentioned the name tags going to contrast and that type of thing, but
Yeah. No, when I normally open a photograph, the first thing I look at is the exposure and see if I can make minor adjustments in the exposure. I don't want to do too much there. And then the second thing I do would look at brightness and contrast. And often, I don't know if you find yourself in this position, but I am often shooting at 100 ASA or ISO. So I want to brighten that image up because I'm going to have darker images.
yeah.
I'm gonna have clearer images, but I'm going to have darker images. So I often need to tweak the exposure just a little bit. Because if you go too much, then you're going to introduce artifacts.
Got it. Thank you.
All right.
I have one more question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
And maybe you're covering it later, or but like on the balloons, when you have
Yeah.
kind of that halo white line around it, is there an easy way to fix that so it's like overexposure or over sharpened or something that can cause that line, edging around the image, and particularly on the white balloon on top. Is there a tool for easily doing
Not-
that?
Not really. The way I would do it is I would use the selection tool. Do you see this tool over here?
Mhm.
I would use this, and I would use a relatively small brush. And I would try to select that area.
Right. Okay. I've done it manually like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know if there was a global thing.
No, there's
Um,
not a magic button for that yet.
Yeah. Okay.
Not that I know of.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Okay, let's move to cloning. So we've got the girl from Ipanema here. And, but her sister's in the photograph too. And wouldn't it be much stronger if it was just her? So let's look at taking the selection tool, and this happens to be the polygon lasso tool, but you could do just the lasso tool. Doesn't have to be perfect in any way. And then I'm going to click and drag and click and drag. And to find that, whoops, I'm going to back up. Now I just hit delete to back up. And then I'm going to do all of this water here. And I'm going to get rid of the sister. So cloning is easy, but does require an eye. So you go to the clone stamp tool. And why they call it stamp tool, sometimes they call it rubber stamp tool. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Except for when I was a kid, I had a set of rubber stamps and you could rubber stamp a smiley face 100 times. I guess that's cloning. But somehow that got decided. So you pick a size that's going to make sense. And in this case, I'm going to pick a size that's fairly large because I'm going to try to clone a large area from here over here. And there's going to be some nuances to it as well. So the hardness button or the hardness slider is key because if you have an image, I'm going to blow this back up again, that's fairly soft. So she's fairly soft in the background there. And because of that, I'm going to use a fairly low I'm going to use a fairly low amount of hardness. So if I click on the 150 for the size, it gives me the hardness so I can slide that. And I could make it very hard. Actually, I'll do that just to show you because that would be a mistake. So I'm going to pick the area that I want to clone from. And I'm going to hit Alt on a PC or Command on a Mac. And then I'm going to start cloning. I'm just clicking and cloning here. And it didn't do a terrible job with that much. I was thinking that'd be too much in the hardness because it makes a kind of a hard edge. But let's click off of it and see if it's true that it looks okay. Now I'm going to go up. So when I go larger, you can see this edge that it left. So I'm going to go back in my history panel. I'll go back to where I had the lasso. And I'm going to pick the clone tool again. And I'm going to make soft. So somewhere down 15% is my guess, somewhere around there, 14%, that's fine. And then I'm going to choose an area that I want to use. And then I'm going to clone her.
Eric, why did you make a selection and not just go directly to cloning?
Because when you have a soft brush, that's a very good question. When you have a soft brush, which is when you have the hardness turned down like I do, when you have a soft brush, it spills into the other image. Do you see her arm when I move the cursor close to it? It's going to spill, even though I'm over here, I'm nowhere near touching that, that arm. It's going to create a aura around it and it will spill into that arm.
Thanks.
So I'm going to stop cloning where I am right now, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to choose a different spot. So Alt or Command, and I'm going to choose this area down here. And the reason I did that is because it's more natural. The water in that portion is more natural to this, to the area. It had a little bit of a wave there, so I want to try to create that again. Then I'm going to choose another spot over here, and I'm going to fill in that last little piece over there. So let's click off of there, and I've still got some edge. You can see that, which I didn't expect. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to choose a feather on this selection now of about 8. That's 8 pixels. And I'm going to come in here. Well, actually, I'm sorry. I need to go back and deselect everything. Okay, now I will select with 8 pixels as the feathering point. And what a feather does is it just creates a soft blending area between what you're cloning and what was there originally. So let's go back to the clone tool, Alt or Command click. I'm going to fill her in. I'm at 100% opacity. And by the way, the opacity is up here. And it's very handy if you're doing faces and things like that, for that opacity to be much lower. You wouldn't want 100% if you're doing a face. Okay, so I think we're pretty close. Now I'm going to pick up a different part of the wave down here. And I'm going to come in. Okay. Now we should have lost any of that edging. Yeah. So now we don't have the edging. That was part of the problem.
Eric, I know you explained, but I don't quite still don't understand the selection tool. Explain again why you use the selection tool or the poly whatever it was tool.
Yeah.
Why did you use that again? It's not clear to me.
Because I did not want to affect her arm, because that object, her sister was very close to her.
Right.
So I created that to protect the main image so I could just clone there. And I'll show you, I can do it right now. I'll show you why you need to do that.
So was it like, so you're sort of like coloring within the lines? I mean, is that the
Yes.
point?
No, you're not really coloring in the lines because you still have a soft area around it.
Yeah.
But okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this clone area, and I'm going to come in here as if I was just going to do near her, but not on her, right?
Right.
And I don't know if you can see it, but
I can.
okay, put some waves on her
Yeah.
arm.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to Control Z to take that away.
Yeah.
And even if you have a very small brush, you'd have to get down to like maybe 20. And maybe you could do it with a 20. So I'm going to pick an area of 20. But then that wouldn't be big enough to create the look. And now it's making a straight line here.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, the hardness correlates to the size of the brush. So the larger the size, the more hardness you can give it without creating much effect. Can you see a little bit of a soft glow in here? in this tool right now. Watch it as I go over that wave. It creates a little bit of a softness. No, kind of hard to see. Anyway, we'll skip past that. But that's the reason you don't want to do that. Oh, while I'm here, I'm going to use that selection tool again. Because she got a tag sticking out of the back of her bathing suit here, huh? And for this, I'm going to need a small feather. Maybe, let's use 2 pixels. And I'm going to run that across the back of her bathing suit. And then I'm going to take my clone tool and I'm going to do low hardness and a small size brush. Too small. And then I'm going to take an area of her back. And by making that selection tool, I cannot hurt that bathing suit. I can come way down here. It's not going to do anything.
Okay. All right, now I got it. So it is kind of coloring within the lines. Okay, I got it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
it just
Yeah.
protects the
Protects
area.
it. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
helpful.
So Eric,
Yes.
you know what I noticed? The new version now has content aware fill.
Yes.
And so it makes all of this so much simpler. You just draw a lasso around what you want to disappear and it goes away.
It does, and it's pretty good for most things.
Yeah.
The closer an object is to another object, it gets worse and worse.
Okay.
But you're right. So let's use that.
So Eric, the other thing because the new version was like a miracle to me. So if you select subject,
yeah,
it'll protect her.
exactly.
And then it just happens so quick that people aren't familiar with all the selection tools.
Uh-huh.
The program kind of does it automatically for you.
Yeah, so I'll show you right now.
Yeah, thanks.
So here's the select subject. So you have to be on this tool over here, which is a selection tool. It's a quick selection tool. And then you come up and click select subject.
Where did you go to select subject?
I went over here to the quick selection tool.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you go to the top of that screen,
Oh, okay.
it says select subject.
Got it. See it.
You
Thanks.
could even select and mask, but you don't need to. But and it made a very good selection, even underneath her arm here.
Yeah.
So now she's selected, and then I can do select inverse. So that means everything but her is selected now. And then I can come over here and like Jeff was saying, I could do, I can do this. I can just create a, whoops. Sorry, this is a selection tool. I'm going to back out of this, but this is very, very handy. If you don't understand it, play with it a little bit, look online. I did a class on it a couple of months ago. You can look for that on YouTube, on the YouTube or in one of your emails. But it's a great tool to use. Now I'm going to do the content aware fill. So I'm going to take a lasso tool and I'm just going to make a selection over here. And like Jeff was saying, see these flaws out here. I don't know, there's people swimming. I don't know what's out there, but you could just select it and then you can come over to edit, content aware fill. There's two of these, by the way, but anyway, and you click on it. And it's going to say, use the sampling tool to add a sampling area. And all that means is it's saying, where do you want me to choose to make this fill? And I just chose an area and said, apply and okay. Now, Jeff, you can see it didn't do a great job.
Hmm.
However, that's because of one other factor that Photoshop doesn't tell you about. And I'm going to go back to my lasso and back where we were. Now this time I'm going to do edit fill, not content aware fill. And then I'm going to say content aware.
Got it.
Then I'm going to say okay. And that
Oh, perfect.
did a much better job. And the reason it does, it's looking on both sides of wherever the selection is to make a decision of how to fill that space. Now, it didn't do it quite perfectly, but it did a pretty good job. And if you're doing things quickly, you can easily use this to do something like that. We can even decide to clone some more footprints if we wanted to. So I'm going to go over here to the clone tool. And I needed something big enough to do that footprint. Okay, so I'm going to say Alt or Command. And I'm going to clone this area. And I'm going to go over here. Now, if I was doing this for myself, I put it on a separate layer in order to change the angle of it later. But I'm just going to, for now, I'm just going to put in some extra footprints. I can put one there. I'm going to go back to it. And I'm going to do Alt again, click. And then I'm going to put another one right over here. And it looks like we have many footprints. And it's pretty much perfect. It doesn't need anything because it's using the area around it to blend in with. And that's pretty cool. Okay, any more questions on that aspect? I'm going to do a little bit more on cloning in a second here.
That last step probably works better if your background is fairly uniform texture like you have in the sand.
Exactly. I'm
Yeah.
very fortunate there. If I was trying to put that footprint in the wave, it wouldn't work so well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all based on context. Yeah.
I have a quick question on the clone tool. There was the pattern clone as a second option. I don't know if you've covered that or, but I was curious how that's used compared to the normal clone.
Yeah, it's a fairly useless tool.
That's what I found. I couldn't figure it out. I didn't understand it.
Yeah, you can create patterns with it, but that's for, like, for instance, if you were wanting to replicate wallpaper and you have a fleur-de-lis and you want to replicate 20 of them or something like that,
Okay.
then that's what you'd use it for.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So now let's go to the next image. And in this case, we've got some things that are simple yet complicated. So let's look at this. And so this is something that you've seen in many of your own photographs. There's hair in the face, and you'd like to maybe fix that hair in the face. In this case, I don't think it really detracts, but it was a good example, so we'll use it. And so a couple different ways you can approach this. First is there's a tool over here, the spot healing brush. And I talked about this a lot in the last class, last month. But the spot healing brush is not a clone, it is a repair tool. It's going to look at the areas around the area that you brush, and it's going to replace it. So let's try this just based on what I have right here. And I'm just going to draw on top of this, and it made it go away. Now, I'm going to do the rest of it. And we're even going to do this little shadow here. And it does a pretty good job of getting rid of most of the things that I wanted to get rid of in that hair. The one thing it doesn't do is we've got this kind of a harsh line here. So now I'm coming back to my clone tool. And remember I said opacity is important when you come to faces. So I'm going to come down here to 40-ish. And I'm going to use a smaller brush. And I'm going to make it pretty soft. And then I'm going to choose an area, a little bigger brush. I'm going to choose an area here. And remember, my opacity is 41%. So it is not going to do 100% of this. It's going to allow me to blend this a little better. And I can do that for several of the areas. So I'm going to, so remember I'm in the clone tool, so I'm going to say Alt, select by clicking or Command, and then I'm going to add a little highlight here. There's a little too much highlight in her cheek there. So I'm going to take this area and I'm going to bring my opacity down more, because a little highlight I actually think looks pretty good in many cases. But I'm going to take this and then I'm going to blend it on top of that. So it reduces that highlight. I'm going to come down here as my source for the clone, click, and I'm going to reduce that. Same thing here, source, click. Now, you're going to look immediately to that highlight since I just fixed it. It's better than it was. So now it makes me feel like I want to make it even more subdued. So I'm going to make a little larger brush. I'm going to take my 33% is probably still okay for the opacity. I'm going to click here as my source. I'm going to go on top of it. I'm going to brush it a couple of times. I'm going to choose this as my source up here. And I'm going to come down here and brush it again. I can do the same thing here and work out that shadow a little bit. And then come from below and work up that shadow a little bit above. So I'm just trying to reduce those elements there. So clone tool really takes a lot of trial and error on a face because you don't want to mess up a face. And you wanted something that looks fairly natural as well. But that's one way to remove those hairs out of someone's face. Okay, any questions about that?
Yes, Eric, when you're duplicating the skin tone, are you clicking on that? How do you click on that, sir? How do you, when you're picking a section to move, how do you activate it, I guess?
Yeah, so I am looking at, so she has brown golden tones in this part of her face and then pinker tones in her cheeks, right?
Right.
So if I want more brown tones, for example, I'm going to choose a source on her skin that has more brown tones. And I do Alt and click. And then I bring that down to where I want to paint or to where I want to change the color. Were you able to see that?
And when you're talking about the size of the brush,
Yeah.
The smaller the area, the smaller the brush, is that the rule of thumb there?
Yeah, typically, also, the larger it is, the softer it will be on the edges. So that's kind of important to know too.
Yeah,
Because
great.
if you're smaller, it's going to be a little, create a little lines that you may have to repair later.
Okay. Oh, great, thanks.
Okay. I'm gonna do one more thing here while I'm here. I'm gonna just take a little bit out right there under her eye. And then I'm gonna take and bring some more gold tones up here from her lower jaw here. Because it looks a little fake. I might also bring the sharpness or the hardness up. And paint that in. Now, can you see that it's duplicated part of this hair over here? Which I didn't want it to do, so I'm going to do Control Z to make that go away, and I'm going to move further away. But if you're anywhere close to this, it'll pick it up and use it where you don't want it. So you have to be careful of that. Just be cognizant of what you're doing there. Okay, now, Jeff, I'm going to use your select subject tool because that has helped the world of blur immensely.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to show you another tool for that as well. That's brand new and fairly automatic in Photoshop. So we're going to go here to the quick selection tool. And then I'm going to say select subject. And it takes a few seconds. And then it created this almost a mask around her. It even picked up some hair that's kind of drifting out here. And in order to make this a little bit more refined, I'm going to choose a little bit more area in her hair here. So I'm going to make this a little larger so we can all see. Now it's created this selection, and I can add to that selection by simply pushing this brush, which is very small, by the way, right now. I can make it significantly larger. And I can choose this area, and it's going to extend the selection. I extended it too far, which is good because now I can show you, you push the Alt or Command tool, and now you can reduce the area by drawing around it. And that's more like what I wanted. Something about like that. Doesn't have to be perfect for the intended use. So I've got that selection. And now I'm going to hit select inverse because I only want the background to blur. I don't want her to blur. And then you go to filter. And I'm going to choose blur. And when you do that, it gives you all these different choices. Blur and blur more are pretty weak. Gaussian blur is the best, and the rest of these you can play with. Motion blur is really cool for special effects. You can make sports-like effects behind a football player or baseball player or person in a boat or someone that's running. You can do some interesting things with it, but Gaussian blur is what we're going to talk about. And then Gaussian blur, I'm going to bring that, I can bring that way up, and it got rid of the whole background and just toned it based on her. And the more you go back, now it's got the ocean that was there originally is blurred. And you can also see, let me go back to about 100 in there, because you can see where her shoulder is. It's pulling some of her color from there out into that background. And I don't really want that, but I do want to blur the background a little more. And so I'll move it down to maybe 30. Okay, so that works for me. And I'll say okay. And then I have to go back, and this is my marquee tool. That's just my go-to to turn off the selection. And now we've blurred the background behind her. So there's also a tool. Let's go back to the beginning of this one. There's also a tool in the new filters. They're called neural filters. And Photoshop will prompt you to, when you update your software, if you haven't already, it'll prompt you to download the neural filters. And there are several, and I did a class on neural filters, and we'll talk a little bit about it. You just click on neural filters, and it loads a panel for you over here. And it'll take a minute to do that. Okay. And for right now, ignore the skin smoothing tool because it's not there. It looks too phony to me. So I wouldn't worry about that one. There are smart portrait. Oh no, depth blur. So now the depth blur tool, I need to turn it on right here. And all I did was turn it on and it's automatically creating a selection of her and it's processing down here on the bottom. And it blurred the background. I don't know how much we can see. Let's see if I can Control Z it. No, it won't let me do that. Did you notice any difference? I didn't really. That's the depth blur, but it will automatically select your subject and blur the background. And something to play with, and it works really well for many, many things. Some things it doesn't work well for, but you have to try it out. And it's probably the best tool in this whole thing. There's something called makeup transfer, where you can take a photograph, one photograph like this one up here in the upper right, and it will transfer, it'll look and say, oh, there's color around the eye, there's color on the lips, and it'll transfer it to another image. I'm not going to do that for you, but that's something you can play with in neural filters. So you just have to open two images and say, use this image as a starter. And then I didn't even download it because I don't have a use for it. But if you did, then you would do that. Oh, this one I really like. I'll just talk about it for a second. This is Colorize. So you'll take an old black and white photograph, and you can it will automatically use artificial intelligence to colorize it. It's not perfect, but it does a pretty darn good job. You can see the example in the right here. Whoops, I guess I got to stay on Colorize. It won't do it because, oh, look what it did to her. It just kind of washed her out. But the idea is that Colorize is for old black and white photographs. Any other questions? Because we've exceeded our time, actually, but.
Said that you have your old classes are recorded. Are they on the website?
Yes, Jim has been putting them on the website, and I will send you a link, though, your own personal link tomorrow, because I will save the recording and process it and then put it up on my YouTube channel, and you can see it there. And then I will send it to Jim as well, and he'll put it up on the club's website. So
all these are on your YouTube website?
yes, they are. So once you get the link tomorrow, you can use that, and that'll take you to the website. And then I think it'll take you directly to the one we did tonight, but you should be able to see the others. And if you can't, let me know, and I'll send you a link so you can get there to see all of them.
Eric, can you send that link to me too, please?
I will send it to everybody.
Everybody, okay.
That'd be great. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have a photo? Do you have a one for Lightroom too?
No, I don't do them for Lightroom, only because I've been using Photoshop so long, and it does many, many more things than Lightroom. And it's just easier for me to use Photoshop. So that's why I do it that way. And a lot of these things you can do in Lightroom, some of them just as well, many of them not as well. So
Eric, I had a quick question if it can fit in the time. I've tried using the patch tool
yeah,
and sometimes it just blurs everything.
yeah, the patch tool is not as perfect as using the clone tool to do it, or I often will make a selection.
Uh-huh.
So let's go back. I'll try to show you real quickly how I, instead of using the patch tool. So let me cancel out of here. And let's go back here. So what Jeff's talking about is a patch tool. Is if you wanted to take part of the image and duplicate it in another area. Is that what you're saying, Jeff?
Yes, uh-huh.
Yeah. So in that case, let's say I wanted one more balloon. So I'll just go over here to the quick selection tool. And I will select this balloon here, which it didn't do a very good job of. So I will now have to use the Alt tool and take away some of the area. And that's, I'm pushing the Alt tool or the Command tool, and that reduces the selection, takes things out of the selection. And then I've got a little blip there, so I'm going to take it and select it again. And if I had more time, I would do this absolutely perfectly, but
So Eric, the thing I was thinking of, if I just wanted to remove the balloon and have the curtain in that area,
yeah,
which seemed to me the patch tool should do that.
yeah,
But it doesn't. It
No.
sometimes looks smeary.
no, it'll look smeary.
Okay.
Patch tool is for landscapes sometimes. If you wanted to take some section of tundra and put it in another area, that can work.
Yeah. So what I've tried doing is like in a car picture where I
Yeah,
have car against a hedge and I
Yeah.
want to move the hedge over the car parked next to it.
yeah,
Sometimes it looks real good and then sometimes the car bleeds through.
yeah. So look at your settings there, but patch tool is,
Tricky.
looks like an easy tool to use for that, but I wouldn't use it.
Okay.
I would just clone everything.
Got it.
Yeah. But while I'm here, I'll just make an extra balloon just for the heck of it. So I'm going to, after I made the selection, I'm going to right click on that selection. And now I can copy, layer via copy. If I wanted to cut it out completely and just leave a hole, then I would say layer via cut, but I'm going to say copy. And now I come back to my move tool, which is this crosshairs up here. And now I've got an extra balloon.
That's a miracle.
And I can do Control T and I can curve it, and I should make it a little smaller because it's going to, as if it was back here. And now I've got an extra balloon. And the only thing I don't have is that all of these have nice ribbons attached to them. And I'm not going to do this right now, but the way I would do it is I would take the polygon lasso tool and I would do a feather of only one. And I would blow this way up so I can see the ribbon off of this one. And I would slowly make my way down this ribbon. You could try to do quick selection tool, but it's going to be hard. So, and before the quick selection tool existed, this is the only way you could do it. So I would go all the way down that ribbon and copy it, but I'll just do a little piece of it. And I can even do this part where it's all tied. And then I'm going to click on that and layer via copy. So I've made yet another layer. I'm going to do Control T, which will allow me to change the angle of it. And I'm going to move it over here. And can't see it because it's too small, but where'd it go? Interesting. Oh, it's so light. Why is it so light? I'm not sure. Anyway, that's the way I would do it. Something happened to it. It's there, it's just extremely light. Not sure why. Anyhow, that's not what we were here for tonight.
Okay.
All right, so that gives you a quick overview of Dodge Burn and Clone and Blur. And I hope you're able to use it successfully. And as we go, I'll do some more complex ones. These are just basic classes, and probably through the next few months, I'll still stay on basic classes. And I'm just teaching 3 or 4 of these tools and how to use them each time. Any suggestions from anyone? I would appreciate hearing from you because I'll mold the class around those suggestions. So just let me know. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank
Eric.
you so
Take
much.
care.
It was
Thank you,
very
Eric.
helpful.
Stay safe.
See you
know.
soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.